Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. If you're driving in your car or you're taking a shower or wherever you are, this is Dorothy, your favorite host, with another episode of Death in Cambodia, Life in America. You guys, I am back with another guest all the way from Khmer, the homeland itself. Today, I have been actually pining away and trying to find this guy, looking and stalking to try to see if I can get him on the pod. And I'm so glad that we have actually agreed and we are here today. We have today Sambath Both Bou Chum. He is a self-taught designer for over 10 years and the co-founder and creative director of one of the top creative agencies in Cambodia. This agency has worked with many, many great, amazing brands such as Google, Forte, and especially the rebrand of Baramey Productions, which you guys all know has just been rising and really, really making its mark in terms of just my musical renaissance, which is just amazing to see. He has specialized in what we've seen Cambodian cultural design elements, but weaving it seems, with global modern design principles. He holds the prestigious 40 Under 40 award for his incredible work pushing Khmer art towards a global scale. I am super, super excited to have him on to pick his brain today. But Wu, welcome to the podcast.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I feel, like I told you before, as a creative, it feels so weird when you get an introduction like that.
You know what? I think creatives deserve more flowers than they do, right? I mean, me personally, I don't think of myself as like a super, super creative person, but we need people out there. Like the art is so important.
Yeah, I agree. I think creatives, shines a mirror back to society.
Right. I agree. Well, Bapu, thank you for coming on to the podcast today. I usually like to start off people by going way, way back and talking a little bit about how you grew up. I know that you grew up in Cambodia. Tell me a little bit about that childhood. It must be different from me being, Khmer American. I am always curious about what the differences are between the two. Tell me a little bit about how you grew up.
Yeah, well, you're forcing me to sort of look way back.
Way back.
Yeah. So despite how I look, I think working in design and not sleeping much kind of ages you a lot. I was born in 1998, which technically still makes me Gen Z. I think that's right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm an only child. I grew up being an only child, and that came with a set of sort of challenges. And I went through the normal public education system. My parents didn't put me in a private school or anything like that growing up. So yeah, I'd like to think that, if you have siblings growing up, when you're in trouble, you would go to your siblings before you go to your parents, right? It's kind of like when you have to go to your parents. That's kind of like the nuclear button if you can't solve whatever issues you're having. I didn't
Right.
have that as a kid. So growing up, I had to like sort of fend for myself a little bit. Made a lot of mistakes, but I guess you learn along the way quite well as well.
Yeah, yeah. And where did you grow up? What city did you grow up? And was it was design encouraged within the family? I think that
Mm,
I know at least here in America, a lot of Asian refugee immigrant families going into design or having that spark for design, even if you did have it, never really felt like something that you could pursue. At least your parents didn't push it because it seemed like it wasn't something that would make a lot of money. Tell me a little bit about, have you always, growing up, have you always felt like you've been a creative, and was it encouraged in the household?
yeah. Yeah. So I personally think that I've always had a knack for creative stuff growing up. I remember when I was in elementary school here, I would think it's grade 1 to grade 6. I was a horrible student. Like in a class of 45 students, I would come in at like 43 or 44 every month on like the monthly test. My parents were not really happy about it. Uh, but but there was one subject that I always scored high on, and that was art, because one of the tests is that you have to draw like art, and that was by far the only thing that I scored well done in public school. I scored
Mm-hmm.
horribly on math, on science, on everything else. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I also grew up with Cartoon Network. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people my age can agree, right?
Yeah.
So I was also exposed to some really good cartoons like Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff
Mhm.
Girls,
Right.
cartoons that had like really strong art directions at the time. I
Yeah.
think they have really distinct art directions by whoever was leading the shows. Yeah, it sparked my curiosity. But again, as a kid growing up in Cambodia at the time,
Mhm.
like you said, a lot of Asian parents didn't really encourage kids to pursue art because it was kind of like there's no guarantee you're going to make it. There's no jobs at the time that indicated that this would be like a viable career path for most kids, right? So it's a
Yeah.
classic story of like, parents want the kids to go to become a lawyer, to become like a doctor. If you're either a lawyer, a doctor, or a disappointment. And I
Yep.
took the third route.
Sounds about
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So I don't know how the Khmer education system is. So you always had a knack for it in elementary school, and then do you guys have high school as well, and then you have to go off to college? Like, what was that journey like to and your relationship with the creative? Was it like you tried to be a lawyer as best as you could, and then you were like, "No, I can't do this. I wanna do something creative." What was that journey like?
Well, I think it was technically called primary school from grade 1 to grade 6, right?
Right.
And from grade 1 to grade 6, I always thought I was stupid, for lack of a better word, because, I would come in last on the monthly tests. All my friends' parents would sort of like brag about how well their kids were doing, and my parents didn't have anything to brag about me. And, I for the longest time, I really thought I was just not smart until I got to high school, which is grade 7 to grade 12 in Cambodia.
Mm.
And my mom started being really strict with sort of me. And, I had limited time I could spend on the TV. I needed to go to like extra classes. I needed to spend time to actually do homework, and she'll be like behind me while I was like trying to do homework and stuff. And like in grade 7, I climbed up the top tens in like all the monthly tests. And then I realized during that moment that I was like, actually, I'm not that dumb. I'm actually smart. I'm just not motivated. And,
Yeah.
that was like a self actualization. It was like, oh, like, actually, I'm not that stupid. Like, I can do this kind of thing. After I realized that there was really nothing in the sort of public education system that was like motivating me, right? To
Mhm.
want to do well. And to give some context, most of the kids my age during that time were all also doing English schools on the side. So, your parents would pay for you to go into like an international English school where you just learn English and, almost basically you just learn how to speak good English.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was always doing way better at those, English classes in schools more than like the public school because I think the way they were teaching was more engaging for me.
Mhm.
You had a lot of different books, a lot of graphics, a lot of games, a lot of things to like spark, a child's like imagination and creativity. Where else in like public schooling here, it's very hierarchical. It's very, you need to memorize this. The way they teach it's more about like memorizing and, conforming to a certain set of rules that society deems, acceptable rather than allowing kids to sort of think for themselves.
Right, right. And so you were in those extra language classes that, were separate from public school. And what you're saying is that you found yourself to do really, really well in that just because of the way that it was taught and how engaging it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we were made to write essays about subjects that we like, right? Where
Yeah.
else in public school or in like in high school, you were made to write essays in Khmer about like a story, a folk tale or something that I personally didn't have any engagement with. Like I didn't have any
Mhm.
like I didn't really like the stories, and not to say that they were bad stories. I think looking back now, the stories were actually pretty good, but it's just like I didn't really, it was not engaging for me at the time as a kid.
Yeah, yeah. So you found that you are not dumb and
Yeah,
that you
I think
that
I can say
you
that now.
You I can definitely say that from over here. You found out that you are very, very smart and that if you apply yourself correctly and have the right kind of teaching environment and learning environment, then you can really thrive. What did you do after school? After high school? Did you attend college? And tell me about what your initial path was, or has it always been kind of getting into something creative?
I think this intertwines a bit with like a little bit of personal family stuff that happened during that time for me.
Mm,
So you finish high school in grade 12, right? So
right.
the 2 years at the end of high school, I had like a big falling out with all my friends in high school, right? So literally, I was like shunned out of my circles. I had no friends anymore, and I started to volunteer at a church at the time. So
Mm.
I got into the church. I became like a guitar player for the church's band, and I started to like discover music, and that
Wow.
sort of like helped me a lot. So I met a lot of cool people at the church, and then I continued to stay with that church for a few years after I even finished high school. Education wise, after high school, I didn't know what I really wanted to do, but I just wanted to pick something and just have it be over with, right? So I just picked to go to this university in Siem Reap. I grew up in Siem Reap at the time, and I just told my parents like I'm just gonna pick IT as a major because I like computers and I like video games. So I guess I get to work with computers and learn with computers every day. And yeah, I just went to like this really basic, I think, university. Found a way to get a scholarship there for like the 4 years that you're supposed to do. During that time, I met a good friend at church whose name is Joey, who was moving from Australia to Siem Reap.
Mm.
And, we hang out with like the church people a lot. And I learned that Joey was a designer and an artist. He's a really talented illustrator and really talented designer. And he was trying to move to Cambodia to start like a small studio. So while I was like doing university in the morning, one day I would just ask Joey like, hey, dude, can you like teach me Photoshop? I feel like I want to learn Photoshop now. And he was like, oh, you want to learn Photoshop? Why do you want to do it? I'm like, oh, like I've always liked to draw when I was younger, what I told you about in primary school. And he was like, well, I'm trying to start a small studio. Why don't I give you like a part-time gig here? You come help me out in the studio and, you can learn on the job and you kind of get paid a little bit as well. And I was like, great. And at that point, I've never touched during my time in like high school, I barely touched a computer.
Mm.
So I was doing university in the morning, and in the evening, in the afternoon, I would go to the studio and just like work normally. I got paid like a part-time salary. And it got to the point where I really liked working at the studios that I stopped going to university without telling my parents. That went on for like a whole year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So when my parents eventually found out, you can imagine, they were definitely not happy.
Oh my gosh. A whole year?
Mm.
That's that's dedication. That's hard. That's hard.
Yeah. And I think what drove me to sort of do that was that, first year of uni, here you're supposed to learn basic knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And I was assuming that basic knowledge for me, because I chose IT as a major, meant that, oh, like they were teaching you about computers and everything. No, basic knowledge just meant that they were teaching you history and all the same stuff in high school.
Mhm.
So I got really annoyed.
Here you are again, being taught things that don't motivate you. And so, we've seen this happen. We've seen this happen before, and it's very similar, honestly, in I feel like college in the United States too. Like the first 2 years, really, it's just like stuff that truly has nothing to do with your major. Tell me about the early beginnings of learning Photoshop and how that made you feel to start learning the skills and start creating your own art.
It felt great, to be honest, because I remember growing up, Cartoon Network would air like these behind the scenes um, like snippets of like what goes on behind like each show, and you would
Yeah.
like see concept art of like Ben 10, Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, and you see all these amazing illustrators like drawing the characters. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my god, I don't know how I get there, but I want to get there at one point. Like I want to be in professional like studio environment.
Mm.
And then when Joey gave me that opportunity, seeing him doing client work just next to me and sort of like seeing how he made certain decisions and how he sort of processed everything, I was like, this is like surreal. But then when you actually learn the tools, you're like, oh my god, this is like harder than I expected. It's
Yeah.
actually you have to like use a lot of your brain power.
Yeah.
So first step was just getting the tools down, so you know like which tools to use for what areas. And then the second one is you have to develop your conceptual thinking. That was harder to do than learning the tools for me.
And how did you go about developing concept?
I think consuming a lot of the content really helped.
Mm. Mm.
I think if you meet a lot of the designers that are working professionally now, they would say like good designers like to read. And I totally agree. Like reading is crucial, even though at the time I hated reading, but I consume a lot of content. I spend a lot of time on the internet. I watch a lot of shows. I was really into pop culture, into movie, into all those things. So,
Mm,
by accident, I was learning a lot of like art concept and things like that. Like, when you watch a lot of movies, you sort of realize the pattern, like the hero's journey and all that stuff. You kind of learn all those things subconsciously, even though you can't really tell it, right?
right, right. So you officially told your parents that you have not been going to uni and that actually you are spending more and more of your time learning and building your conceptual thinking and learning these skills with Photoshop. How long were you with Joey? And what was that journey like after uni?
So I didn't actually tell my parents. They found out
Oh,
on their
okay.
own. So I was not working on my own time. I was working on their time.
I'm sure they were very happy about that.
I think what happened was one of my professors realized I was not coming, and they kind of knew my dad or my parents, and they gave my parents a call. My parents had to sit down with me. That was interesting. So along the same time, I spent about a year working with Joey or for Joey, right?
Mm.
For his design company called Archetype at the time. And to give a bit more context, me, Joey, and we had another guy who was also working for Joey as well. All three of us were also volunteering for the church full time, or basically volunteering for the church, right? I was in the band. The other guy was also in the band, and Joey was volunteering as the media head or head of media. So we were responsible, and me by proxy, me and the other guy was also helping out with media stuff. So it got to the point where like the church work would take up more of our time than actual client work. And then I
Mm,
think Joey was expecting a kid to come soon, so he couldn't really sustain. There's too much pressure and everything. So he
right.
decided to move back. So he sort of had a one-on-one with me and the other team member about like, what we wanted to do after he would go back to Australia. And I told him I wanted to freelance. So that happened a few months or a little bit before my parents found out I was not going to university anymore. But by the time they found out, I had some freelance clients already. I was working with people around town, these
Mm,
hotels, doing branding work and logo design stuff for them. So
yeah.
when my parents found out and told me to do like a sit down with them, I kind of had like a way out. I told them like, look, I'm sorry, not responsible of me to not go to school and not tell you, but I got a job now. I'm freelancing, and this is how much I'm sort of earning, through the freelance work, which is at the time was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Compared to like how much you would get for a full time job straight out of like uni or high school.
Right.
So they told me like, okay, they were angry. Now they're less angry, and then they were like, okay, we get it. It seems like you want to do creative stuff as a career path, great, but you still need a degree. So they told me like, okay, let's go back into uni, finish your degree, and then you can do whatever you want with your life.
Mm,
And I was like, okay. So I enrolled back and I switched my major to marketing.
mm,
And then I think I did marketing for about a year or not even a year. And that's when I got an opportunity to work for Baramey. So sort of everything is kind of overlapping, in that point in my
mm,
life. So what happened there was that Joey was not moving back to Australia. He was still in Siem Reap. And Joey, aside from being a designer, he's also a really talented 3D artist. And he, through a friend, got contacted by someone at Baramey to design like this project. I think the project, I don't think I can share about it, but people at Baramey was just like, we also need a brand identity for this project we're doing. And they asked Joey, do you know anyone that's into identity design or can do branding? And Joey's like, but it's my guy.
mm-hmm.
So me and Joey went to meet Andy. I think you probably know Andy, who's Flora's younger brother. And that's how I met Andy. And then Andy invited both me and Joey to come to Phnom Penh to pitch for this project. So yeah, everything was kind of overlapping. And me and Joey both came to Phnom Penh at the time, right? And we went to the Baramey office, the old office that they had. And I met Laura in person. I was a big fan of hers. The funny thing is, I told you that I was in the band for church. I was playing electric
Mm-hmm.
guitar. There
Right.
was two motivating factors that pushed me into wanting to learn guitar at the time. It was Linkin Park and Laura when she came out with like Spider Monkey in like 2010.
Oh my gosh. Did you tell her that?
I
Fair.
So in high school, I actually sent her like a really weird fan like message on her Facebook page. I think I said something like, "Hi Bong, I love your work. I have this chord progression. Can you try it and make a song out of it?" I said some like really like cringy stuff like that. So funny thing is, when we were in the meeting, me and Joey and Laura and everyone, we had to sign like an NDA for like this project, and I wrote my full name, like, somebody signed NDA, and then I handed it to Laura, and she saw it. She's like, "Hey, wait a minute, you're that kid from Facebook," and I was like, "No." I was like, "Oh my god, oh no." I was like,
Please, no, don't remember.
yeah, like the one time I
Please.
actually don't want her to know. I was like, but it was cool that she remembered, like, it was like surreal. So yeah, it was like I went through the pitch with Joey. It was fine, and then we went back to Siem Reap, and then I sent in my proposal for the project to do the branding for it. I didn't get the project, but then they offered me a full-time job for Baramey as like a designer, as a senior designer. And
Mm.
at the time, I re-enrolled back into uni to study marketing. So I thought about it. I was like, okay, if I take this job, I would have to move to Phnom Penh, which I don't think my parents would let me. And I didn't want to have to transfer university because you need a certain credit score to transfer, right? And my credit score was like all messed up because I dropped out for a whole year.
Yeah.
So I called my dad and my mom. They said, no, don't, you can't move to Phnom Penh. I called my then girlfriend at the time. She said like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't move. That's too far. So I was like, okay, what can I lose, right? So I called back the Baramey people, and I told them like, if you want me, can you give me a remote job where I can work from Siem Reap, and then I can go to Phnom Penh once a month. I think that would be better. I was fully prepared to not get that job. I was like, I'm ready, like I'm just gonna give them what the terms I need to make this work. And then if I don't get it, I don't get it. I move on with my life. And then they agreed. So that was around beginning of 2018. So I worked for Baramey for around a year as well, till the beginning of 2019. So that
Mm.
was the real. So everything was kind of overlapping. So I was doing. So I switched to night class. So I was doing school, university in the evenings, and then in the morning I worked like full time for Baramey.
Talk to me about, because here in the US, I feel like Baramey Productions has really gotten huge, especially in the last couple years with all the international news about how well all the artists are doing, and they're touring here in the US. They did their first tour out here for the first time last year, 2 years ago, actually. And so
Mm,
a lot of people in the US really now know, I feel like, Baramey Productions. In Cambodia, back in 2018, did they still kinda have that same presence? Was it like
mm.
a super, super cool new thing that was happening in the music scene even back then?
I think it's okay. How should I rephrase this? It was a mix, a bag of
Mm.
things of what people knew Baramey by at the time. Where, oh, sorry, getting a burp. At the time that I joined, they had, I think, a mismatch in terms of what their brand identity was and how people knew them. So
Mm,
one of the challenge, I mean, my secret agenda when I joined was I kind of secretly wanted to rebrand the company from the very beginning.
mm,
But in order to do that, you need to your case on why you think the company needs a rebrand, right?
mhm.
And one of the reason that we talked about with the team was that I don't know if you've ever seen the old Baramey logo.
I have not.
So it's based on, I forgot the name of the statue, but it's based on a statue in one of our temples that is representing like the perfect woman, where she's like doing this some bare hand.
Mm,
And that was the old logo. It was very old fashioned. It was very traditional. And
mhm,
the case that we made was that, look, Baramey culture is all about the hip, the new, the future of like Khmer music. This brand identity right now doesn't really represent that. Actually,
mhm,
it's representing the opposite. It's positioning Baramey as more of a traditional Khmer music label, which at the time there was a lot of those type of companies here. So this is why we need a rebrand. We need to reposition ourselves so people would see us as the new hip, cool people in town. And another issue at the time was also like, I think people knew the artists more than the actual company as well.
mm.
Like, they knew Laura, they knew all the artists, but no one actually knows Baramay.
Yeah.
So the one of the other goals was that we wanted the company to have a bit more visibility in the public eye.
Mhm.
So Laura and Mintida agreed, and yeah, I started doing the process of like working on the rebranding during like my time there.
And at that time, you are still fairly early on in your career. How confident did you feel in terms of navigating the rebrand for a company that artists that you admired so much? I mean, I would imagine you feeling a little bit nervous in a sense, or did you feel like you had enough experience to really take that project on? What was that like?
Okay, so to give some context, at that time where I got to work for Baramey, I had like a handful of good projects in my portfolio in terms of brand
Mm,
identity, right? I
mm,
also worked with some American clients that I knew from church that, they came here to visit our churches, and then we kept in touch, and then they would hire me for some projects. So I used those case studies to sort of pitch for that project at Baramey. And there's the quote, blessed with ignorance, cursed with knowledge. And I
mm.
think when you're younger, that's kind of where you're at. You don't know the world, but you have all the confidence. You don't know what's going to go wrong, but you're kind of confident that you can do it. So
Yeah.
I was confident that I can do it. And I kind of was questioning whether I can make a living doing only identity design and branding in Cambodia at the time too. Up to that point, I didn't really have uh like 100% great experiences with all the clients I worked with. There were some
Mm,
really horrible clients I worked with as well, when you start freelancing. So in the back of my mind, I was always questioning, it's like, oh, can I find a good project to work on in Cambodia, or do I have to find a way to move out of Cambodia to work on design in the capacity that I wanted to, right? So
right.
when I was working for Baramey, that project ended up being the catalyst that showed me that actually I can make this work as a career path here. There are cool companies here that are looking to make their identity clear, right? And they need a good designer, and they need a designer that knows how to do that. And maybe that would be me later on. I don't know yet at the time, right? So I was super confident. I remember asking the whole company, like the company was smaller at the time. So I asked to organize this like brand workshop for the whole company. And we just mainly talk about what branding was to them, right?
Mm,
Because the word branding, a lot of people, when you hear that word, they think about many different things. Some people think about a logo. Some people think about colors. People think about like, luxury items, things like that. So the workshop was just meant to get alignment for everyone to get a clear definition of what branding was. And the quote I used was from Marty Neumeyer, who I love. He wrote The Brand Gap and Zigzag, some of the best brand related books out there for designers to read. So the quote is that a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, company, or service, or even another person. So a brand was a reputation. It was not the visual aspect of everything, or the things people recognize. It was just your reputation. And I remember the whole team was like, "Oh my god, yeah, it makes sense now. I never thought about it. We never thought about that." So yeah, I was really proud of it. Everyone seemed to be engaged, and my confidence is like still there, but it was just figuring out the day to day stuff. That was a bit of a challenge for me at the time.
yeah. After you finished this rebrand project with Baramey and, you mentioned that it was kind of the catalyst, and so it seems like you can confidently say then you were responsible for a big portion of the kind of the cool way that we view Baramey today? Like, would you say that you're kind of responsible for some of that, at least on the design aspect? Is that
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would be the right person to testify to it. I think
sure.
it's the people that are outside of the company, the viewers, the fans, and everyone, and the people at the company that are uh you know that would give a better testament to that. Because if I say like, I made them cool and all this stuff, it kind of like it's from my ego. I don't know how I feel. It feels a bit weird to say it, right?
I know. And I tried not to I understand where you're coming from. It is hard to kind of what they say, toot your own horn for that sort of thing. I guess another way to probably ask the question then is, were you then after the project, were you recognized, as I guess it propelled your career in a sense after doing and working with Baramey?
Yeah,
Is it
I would say so. Yeah.
yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and to hit on a point that opportunity was a catalyst for everything for me was during that project, during the process of like designing the new brand identity for Baramey. That's when I met my current business partners.
Mm,
So I wanted to do like a custom typeface, a custom font for the rebrand, and I went on Google Fonts to look at some Khmer fonts, and that's when I found one of my business partners. So we chat. I found his Facebook, I messaged him. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this rebrand for this company. I want to know how much you would charge for like a custom font. And then, we didn't ended up going for a custom font at the time because of budget constraint. But I learned about him. I'd found out about him, right? And then I also, when I came up to Phnom Penh to interview for the Baramey project that me and Joey went to do that bidding for, I also met a guy that I followed on Facebook, Anagata, who's now my other business partner. We went for food, and I realized that so Vijay and Anagata already knew each other. So, after working in Baramey, we went out for drinks, we hang out a lot, and that's sort of how like we started Anagata, our current practice as well.
And was this after working with Baramey and closing out that project, you had it in your mind then that it's one thing to like continue a career in design. I think it's completely different to actually like want to start a company. So what was it? Did you feel like you just met these two partners and they both wanted to also start their own company, and so therefore you guys created one together? Because there's a lot of stuff that goes beyond just design when you actually decide to want to open a company.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that decision making.
I think so. So during that time, all three of us was in a transitional stage in our lives, right? So I was planning to get married. I got married at the end of 2019. Anagata had a different design company that he was leaving, and also really really important transitional stage for him. So Vijay at the time, he's a software developer, and he was doing software development full time for like a company here. But he's also been doing like font design, type design for the last 10 years as a secondary thing. And he was also wanting to do it full time, do font design full time. So we didn't start the company right away. I remember we went to like this craft beer garden place. We were just talking about all the pet peeves we had about the design industry in Cambodia at the time. We all agreed that the work that was coming out of like certain like local firms here were not good from an international perspective. It was like very local, not a lot of design understanding backing them up. For lack of a better word, I'm gonna curse word, but you can cut it out. But we mainly just shit talk a lot of like people's work during that like little gathering. We were all just like, oh my God, can you believe that logo? The kerning is horrible. They don't know how to kerr, We had beer and we were just like shit talking everyone. And after that, we hang around. We started a Facebook community page for designers called Katna at the time, which we changed the name to Mandom now. And that was before the Anagata, right? So we just got an opportunity to go work at a type design company in Bangkok for 3 months for their designer in residency program. And he took it. He quit his job at the IT company he was working for. He went there. He worked there for 3 months. He met the founder of that company. The company has been around for 20 years, I think. And he got really inspired after talking to the founder. So he came back. He pitched us on like starting something together. And then that's how Anagata got started.
Wow. You mentioned something very interesting. So it seems like at the time, environment in terms of creative agencies in Cambodia was lacking something that you guys saw needed.
Yeah.
What was that? What was the creative environment lacking that you guys felt like you could fill?
I think just in terms of like the caliber of work that we were seeing being implemented professionally, right? For example, okay, I don't know how many designers are listening to this, but kerning, kerning is just the spacing between like the letters when you're designing like a logo type. Like you have to learn kerning when you go to design school. And ironic for me to say because I didn't go to design school and self-taught, but I did learn kerning by myself. But like, there's there's a technique to kern things properly, right? A lot of the design work in Cambodia didn't really follow these foundational and principles that you needed to know to do professional like logo types and things like that. And the consensus between the three of us was that a lot of the design work here was pretty surface level, like beyond just picking a font and color. There was no intentionality behind it. Like I like to say that design is intention with purpose. So, there was no intention, there was no purpose, we feel. And then there was on the execution side, a lot of fundamental design principles were missing as well because of the design education here was at the time was really lacking, right? So yeah, we thought we could probably do this better. there is an opportunity for us to fill this gap. And we didn't know it was going to work, but we gave it a shot. And that's why we started the Anagata, the studio. And fortunately, so far, I think it's been working out.
How is it that you guys were able to have that education, that elevated education versus I hate to say that. That doesn't sound right. But like how were you guys able to have that elevated skill set in comparison to maybe some of the other agencies? Do you think it's because the standard just wasn't set as high as you guys have set it? Or was there something like a different class that you guys took that allowed you guys to see that? I mean, obviously, I know that you're self taught, but like,
Mm,
or was it just quite honestly maybe the detail orientation that you guys all seem to have and the passion that you guys have? What makes you guys different?
yeah, that's a good question. I think it was a combination of a few things. The first one is probably the detail like orientation that we have. Like we were so focused on the detail at the time.
Mm.
And I like to say, like, you need to put your 10,000 hours in. And given that, I didn't have any friends after high school, I had a lot of time to put my 10,000 hours in. Yeah, it was just literally like drawing type and looking at like design projects from like amazing firms all over the world. But I
Yeah.
think another issue was the mindset. A lot of the design community in Cambodia didn't really look outwards or internationally
Mm.
to get like a status quo, feel of what the status quo is, right? I think a lot of the design community here would just judge things on a local level. If I'm better than that guy, that's fine. But I don't need to look
Yeah.
to my neighbors or the international design community. And for us, like I think that was a really limiting belief. I think we shouldn't just be striving to be the best in Cambodia. We should be striving to be one of the best in the world. And I still hold that belief to that day, right? And another thing is for me personally, because I really love doing identity design for like different companies. And in the identity design world, you see a lot of like projects and logos that are still being used today, even though they were designed way back in like the 1970s and things like that, right? So I had this want and need. I wanted my work to last for like a really long time, right? Which means that you need to design it really well and you need to learn the proper principles and fundamentals of design to apply it on your work so that it can
Mm.
last for like the next 20 years without having to be changed, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think it was just a combination of it. And fortunately, all three of us was aligned in that way of thinking. It took, some finessing it took us like 2 years to figure out how we'll work best with each other. Yeah. But at the end, having that alignment in the goal is really crucial for us.
And especially since we know how quickly Cambodia is growing and
Mm,
how many more business opportunities, especially as we see a lot of manufacturers kind of shift and move towards Southeast Asia. The opportunity to really work with big global brands seems to be growing in Cambodia and seems like you guys are filling that need and that void.
yeah. I mean, okay, something I've learned is that the need for local firms to work on, or the international brands looking to work with local firms, that need has always existed, to be honest.
Right.
I think after a few years, I think I sort of made that realization. But the issue was not whether there would be enough work. There would always work. There would always be enough work, right? But the issue was that there was not a lot of local firms at the time that can take on a project on that level
Mm.
because aside from the skill set you need in design to work on those projects, there's also the professional side of things like project management, communications, which is why being able to communicate well in English is really crucial. We're a bilingual office. We speak both Khmer and English here, but there are certain instances where we need to communicate in English because of the clients and the projects we're working on. So it
Right.
was a combination of things. But yeah, I think to this day, the need for a local firm to work on project is still prevalent. Because if you think about it, when a company or when an international brand wants to break into like a local market, they need people who speak the tongue to work on it so that it doesn't feel like an outlier, right?
Tell me when I think it's just so interesting because you are basically the liaison between the art of the country, but also doing it in a way that's going to translate on a global scale. I was reading something where it says that, as I said in the bio, you specialize in creating things that have a touch of Cambodian cultural design elements, but bring it to the global scale in a way that's also, I don't want to use the word digestible, but like essentially bringing out Cambodian
Mm,
elements within the art, but just on an elevated global scale.
mm,
How do you balance that? How do you how do you process that in a way, and like what are, when you say Cambodian elements, like what does that even mean?
mm.
And what are the negotiables and non-negotiables as you're trying to create something but still stay true to the Cambodian art elements?
It's a really good question. So there's a question that me and my team often talk about in the office.
Mm.
And the question is, what does my design look like? And we often like to ask a lot of people this, what do you think my design looks like? So automatically people would think about Khmer, the the intricate ornament design that you see on our temples, Angkor Wat
Mhm.
and all that stuff, right?
Right.
But when you try to apply those very detailed ornamental design elements onto like a logo, you realize that they don't really work because if it's really small, it's too much detail. Can't tell anything, right? So when I started design, I hated Khmer Khmer, right? I hated it because how do we make our brand look Khmer? We just add Khmer Khmer, we add like a statue in, and then it ended up becoming a cliche or a parody version of what a Khmer company should be. And that was my perspective, right?
Mm.
So to combat that, I always try to push toward the other extreme end, which is to be like a modernist. Let's take things out of, it as much as we can and just reduce it to its core essential. And that philosophy is really just inspired from Swiss design, right? And I love Swiss design, but I always struggle to sort of justify like, well, is there a way to make it modern, but also still be tied to like, traditional design thinking that we may have in Cambodia? And I didn't study Cambodian classical art, so I didn't really have any information. But then while working on a few projects a few years ago, one of my team members bought this book called Khmer Khmer. And the author is a professor at the RUFA, the Royal University of Fine Arts in Cambodia. And in the book, it's a really good book. I recommend a lot of people to get it if you can. So in the book, he has a lot of chapters, and then he basically teaches you that a lot of the traditional like command that you see on the temples are based on simple geometric foundations. They're based on circles, they're based on squares, they're based on triangle, right? And that sort of clicked for me. It's like, oh, all the really beautiful ornamental design were all based on these simple geometric shapes. So
Mm.
that would mean that if we take out all the, you know, ornaments and just have the geometric shape, they're still Khmer in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So that sort of like gave me a bigger justification to keep reducing things in my work. Because, when you're designing a logo, you can't have it be too illustrative or else it's not going to scale down really well. It's going to be a cliche. It won't be a good logo. So, finding out about that gave me sort of the green path to be able to take things out, but still have that connection to like my design culture and design thinking.
Wow, I love that. And so, do you find then that, no, I really do love that. I really do love that kind of approach because
Well, to give a bit of more context, even if you just look at from a aerial view of all our temples, it's all based on simple geometry. And there's the golden ratio in how things are calculated as well, right?
Mhm.
So the universal design language that we think is westernized was already applied here thousands of years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's sort of how I'm justifying it. And anyone listening, feel free to like reach out to me and tell me I'm wrong. I'm happy to hear it as well.
I think because you must feel a little sense of responsibility in a sense to carry on, Khmer art, but in a way that is respectable to the culture, but also something that the global scale can adapt to and can take on. Know that every time I have a conversation about art and with artists, especially Khmer artists, there's always that loom that back in the 70s when the war happened, when the Khmer Rouge happened, a lot of artists were unfortunately targeted, right? Any kind of artists, musicians, people who draw, ceramists,
Authors.
authors, everybody and all those people were targeted. I feel like we are experiencing a really, really unique time within the Cambodian culture. At least it feels that way on this side of the ocean, that a lot of the young folks are really, really trying to reclaim and build up that library of art in so many different ways because there seems to be because we're lacking it because a lot of it and so much of it was lost. And so my question to you as an artist as well, do you feel like you have somewhat a responsibility, and is that at all kind of tied to why you're so passionate about the work that you do?
Early on, I would say I didn't really thought about it that way, but now I kind of have that sense of duty to want to like preserve and create, like you said, a catalog and archive of like historical work related to design and art, right?
Hmm.
And I totally agree. Like my thought process on the idea of Khmer modernism sort of also stemmed from this thinking that okay, what would Khmer design look like today? If Khmer Rouge never happened, right? Because like you said, basically anyone that did anything creative got wiped out during that time.
Hmm.
So we lost. There could have been some really amazing Khmer graphic designers that we don't know now, and that's a thinking that is sort of like sad to think about. But despite, not having any information about like graphic designers during that time before the Khmer Rouge, I also kind of look towards architecture as an inspiration here because there's a few like really famous Cambodian architects that sort of applies the same fundamental design thinking that I subscribe to. And one of them is Lukhta Van Maliwan, who designed our national stadium here, which I think you've seen, people talked about him before. And, just seeing his work sort of made me think about, maybe he was not the only one. I'm sure he was not the only one. I'm sure there were a lot more people like him, a lot more creatives like him that were applying the same way of thinking, not just in architecture, but in music, in design, in art, in everything, in poetry, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, thinking about it really kind of makes you sad, but also kind of inspires you to want to like continue to push the status quo here forward.
And how has it been now that you guys have how long have you guys been operating the company now?
So we started officially at the middle of 2019. I stopped working in Baramey around early 2019 after we announced the new logo, the new identity and everything, new branding. And then I realized, oh, like I actually like working on different companies like identity. And I told Laura, my boss, and everyone, and it was they understood it as well. So it was like a really, it was not like anything bad happened. They understood what I wanted to do. So then I talked to my two partners, so Richard and Ankit, and we started Anagata officially middle of 2019. So it's been 6, 7 years now.
Yeah. And since then, I saw on your guys' website, you guys have been able to work with big brands, Google and a bunch of other ones that I saw listed, and I can imagine then the landscape for Cambodian digital artists and people who do logos and they're in Cambodia are now maybe looking up to you guys as the leaders for kind of modern Khmer art in this space.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Okay, I'm gonna toot my own horn a bit. I would say so now. I would say so, but early on, it took time to get to that point, right?
Mm.
I think last year in particular, white was quite eye opening because we started to see the seeds of things planted like 4 or 5 years ago. For example, early on, we actually said no to a lot of projects that either didn't fit the budget that we needed or the timeline or whatever parameters that we needed to work with these clients. And of course, we could have used the money. Any business owner will say that we could have used that extra, but when we said no to a lot of those opportunities, we sort of set a qualifying factor, and we sort of sent this aura of like, okay, while we are good, we need our process, we need our parameters to be able to work on this project to be able to make it effective, right? So recently, that's been coming back, and a lot of people that reach out to us already know mostly how we work, what our process is, and what we are willing not to compromise. And that's been super helpful. And I mean, nowadays, I meet a lot of younger designers that want to do the same work that we do. And that's great. I really love it because when I started, it was hard to find like a design inspiration here, to be honest. A
Mm.
designer that I really wanted to look up to that would also give me time of day that I can talk to them, right? And now
Right.
being able to sort of fulfill that role for other designers here, I feel really proud. And the challenge is not to become jaded because I think I was listening to a podcast a few days ago, but there's a form of cognitive bias where you forget how, because you've been doing something for so long, you forget there was a point in time where you didn't know how to do this stuff and it was all brand new, right? So I have to remind myself every day that, other designers probably don't know what I know nowadays and have to be patient in teaching them. Do I still get annoyed? Yeah, I do get annoyed, but I'm trying not to be jaded about it and try to be more passionate and have fun while teaching people.
Well, I am sure it's only it's only a compliment that they want to learn from you. And as I had mentioned before, you are also we don't have to talk about it that much, but you do have the award for 40 under 40. Tell me about that quickly. Like, how did that seemed to be a recent thing, right? And is that
Yeah,
based off of just the success of the agency, or was that for a particular project?
I think it was a combination of our work here. I can't take credit for all the work we do in the studio. It's a team effort. But
Sure.
given the impact of the work that we've done, and then also I did the Baramey project before we started Anagata, right? So
Mm.
I can't claim it as an Anagata project, but I can claim that I was a part of that process to rebrand Baramey. Yeah, it was pretty good. I usually feel weird about awards because I always feel like I don't deserve it and there's more work to be done, but did talk to a few people and they said, like, you can only do it once, just do it anyway. Someone told me that, look, even if you don't care about awards like this, you have to imagine that your potential clients might care, other people might care, right?
Mm.
And maybe that's how they will find out about you. So now I'm happy I did it. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful to be one of the 40 on there. I would be lying if I tell you that I didn't feel a bit uncomfortable being amongst everyone, but you can't go through life being comfortable all the time. When you feel uncomfortable, I feel like that's when you grow.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And look, as you said, when you were growing up, you didn't really have creatives to look up to, right? Especially in Cambodia. And so you are now becoming one of those people that the next generation can really look up to. Things like that may feel uncomfortable, but it does signal that you have earned enough expertise in something that you can teach, and that there are younger generations can look up to you as a source of potential education or inspiration for themselves in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a odd feeling, but I'm grateful to be where we are and I hope we can continue to be consistent and do more impactful work. Right.
Yeah. I want to ask a few business questions because I do
Okay.
know that there are probably some listeners out there who are really, really fascinated, whether they're designers. I know that they can get a lot of what we've spoken about, but you're also a business owner and you have started this company with two partners, and it seems to be going excellent and you guys are landing great clients. You said it's taken a while for you to get there though. Tell me what was probably the most difficult, unexpected thing when starting this company, and how did you kind of overcome that?
That's a good question. There was a few things. I think the first one was finding a working dynamic between me and my two other partners,
Mm.
because we all came from different worlds. We're all different ages. I'm the youngest out of the three. So just getting into that zone where we found like a rhythm on how we work together. I'm a bit ashamed to admit this, but I like working on design projects alone. I don't really like listening to other people. So, I would be working on something and then Gidit would walk by my computer and he would be like, oh, that kind of sucks. And I'd be like, go away, shut up. And then
How
I
dare
will
you?
look at, yeah, how dare you, like let me do my thing, let me cook. And then I would stare at it for the next hour and I'd be like, actually he was kind of right, you know.
Now I have to admit it.
Yeah, I have to admit it. Just those kind of little things, and vice versa for two of my partners. They have their own things that they were like getting by. So that was one of the challenges. Another challenge was like figuring out our pricing. Oh, I had my own freelance rate prior to Anagata. And when we started the studio, we didn't know how much we should charge for most things, right? So we had to do like a bit of back and forth. We finally found a good rhythm where we would kind of update our rate every 6 months to a year to fit
Mm.
whatever capacity we've grown. And yeah, now I think we're at a place where we're really comfortable with how much we charge in terms of the value that we're providing for the projects and the type of projects that we're getting as well. Another one personally for me was working with staff that we hire. Like, I've never had to manage people. I've never even had siblings. I'm an only child. So,
Yeah, that's true.
I hate to share food. Like if I'm eating and then someone's taking like my fried chicken, I'm gonna, jump on their neck.
It's like, I'm not used
um,
to this. Don't touch my food.
don't touch my food. Don't touch my computer. But now we have to hire people, and we have staff, right? We have a team to work with. So we've gone through like a few staff along the journey, and there are moments where it made me question whether like, am I just like a horrible teacher, or are they not able to learn?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of that self doubt, and after some time going through that experience, you kind of learn that, okay, there are certain people that respond well to the way that I like to teach, and there are certain people that don't respond well to the way that I like to teach.
Mm,
And it doesn't mean that they're bad or good. It just means that, you're not for everyone, right? But you're for someone out there, hopefully. So you just have to spend time to find the right people that respond well, that resonate with the way you're trying to teach and the way you work. And that took like years for me to accept, right?
yeah.
Because I always have that feeling before where like, it's faster for me to do it myself. Why would I delegate? But now I recognize that if I don't delegate, I just do it myself. I'm just not going to be able to hang out on the weekend or be free anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's say that there's a listener out there who is a designer wherever they are,
Mm.
and they are debating starting their own company and starting their own agency. What is one piece of advice that you would share with them?
There's a lot actually.
You're like,
But
what category would you
yeah,
like
yeah.
advice in?
Okay, I think if I can offer a piece of advice, it would be to talk about money first. Don't feel uncomfortable or shame in talking about money, right?
Mm,
Especially if you're in design. I think a lot of creative people kind of ignore or like to keep the money talk for the last, because it kind of feels a bit dirty to talk about money at first, right? Because you don't want people to feel like, oh, this guy's just about money, but you need money to live. So it's okay to talk about the money first. And when you get to a point where you're not uncomfortable anymore to talk about money upfront, I think that's when everything becomes easier, when you're trying to start a practice or start a studio by yourself, or
mm,
just to start something. And maybe another idea is that besides just learning the design skill set, maybe learn a bit of business as well. I had no interest in learning business. I just wanted to sit in front of my computer, design cool stuff, and then have people use it and have people thank me like, "Oh my god, you're so amazing." But that's not how the world works, unfortunately.
mm.
Things like kerning only designers care about. But for business owners, you need to know what they care about, what their day-to-day challenges are, right? So once you learn those concepts, it's quite easier to tie good design on how good design can help their business. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
So money
absolutely.
and learn business. That's would be my two pieces of advice.
Well, Bot, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your experience. I loved learning about your perspective, starting from how you grew up all the way to especially how you've self taught. I mean, that's just crazy. Self taught to achieve all the things that you've achieved. And it seems like also being part of a creative agency in Cambodia that's really being kind of the forefront people who are leading the way to open up the doors of Khmer creativity on a global scale. We need more of that. Would imagine in Cambodia. I'm in America, but I would imagine in Cambodia, like there is such a big need for that, right?
Mm,
It is a small country, but is so concentrated of talented people who I feel like if they were given the right direction, there is most definitely an opportunity for us to have that shining light on the global scale if it's done right. So it takes people like you to kind of be the first people out there to define what that kind of looks like. I love the way that you have also been really thoughtful about making sure that things that you are creating are still in essence Cambodian and finding that way to really do that in a way that is accepted for big companies around the world. That's really kind of the only way that I can see my art being able to move forward. And it's not just within the digital space, like creativity, like digital art, but also just with
mm,
music and with all the different other mediums. So what you're doing is so important. I am so, so proud of how far you've come, and
mm,
I really do wanna give you all the flowers because, again, we had lost so much art back in the '70s from the war. is a sense of responsibility for the people who are creative, I feel like, to continue making sure that we are redefining what Khmer art looks like in this modern age.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for your kind words. Like I like to think that I need to keep my ego in check. So I don't really want to give myself too much flowers. Because as a creative, ego can ruin a lot of things for you. But there's a quote that my business partner helped me refine. So I had this thing called like 10 things design has taught me, right? And it's a
Mm,
list of like 10 short quotes, like simple doesn't mean easy, busy doesn't mean productive, on and on. I'll share it. I have a version 1.0 on my social, but I refined it a lot more. But my
mm,
business partner helped me refine this one. It was called small doesn't mean less. And that's probably sort of my favorite quote right now as well. That's the one that I use on the 40 and the 40 feature. You can make a dirty joke based on that quote as well, but I love that quote so much because it's just being small, doing less doesn't mean that you're not doing much.
right, right. Where can people find you and the agency? Where can people follow you and learn more about your work?
So I'm on Instagram. I'm more active or trying to be more active on Instagram now. So it's my Instagram is bot_boo, BOTH underscore and then BOU. And then on there they'll see like anagata.design as well, which is also my Instagram handle for the studio. And feel free to get in touch. We've been sort of horrible at updating our portfolio on our website, given that we're a small team. So it's always like all hands on deck. But you can look at the work, you can check out my team, and then we also do a lot of community-led events here. We do workshops and talks here in Cambodia quite a bit. We did one with Bong Kai early last year, and he was just here in Cambodia uh, in January as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, we want to push more for design education related work just beyond the client work as well. So hopefully most of that will be up online and people can see it all over the world and not just in Cambodia.
Yeah. Well, I am rooting for you out here in America, and I know that a lot of the listeners will hear this and get a lot of value, whether it be if you are a designer, if you are a business owner, if you are somebody who doesn't think that they have the right education or the right, look at you. You were self-taught and look how far you've been able to go, not only just be a participant, but a leader in this design space. So, but Boo, thank you very much for your
Thank you so
time.
much.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.